It is a cold October 5th in the year 2008. A month ago, Lehman Brothers declares bankruptcy in the United States, heralding in a major collapse in the United States economy. Millions of lives are going to be upended by the uncaring greed and disregard of forces they couldn't understand. Forces far greater and powerful than themselves. But today, on a rainy street in a metropolitan district of Japan, a young man walks down the street alone, carrying an umbrella. The moon shines brightly over his head. He believes that he is alone on that dismal street. He blinks. The moon vanishes, replaced by two piercing red eyes that loom over him. He blinks again. Then he is gone. A little bit later, he will awaken in a strange place. The moon has been replaced by a burning sun over his head, a pink and white polka-dotted wall on his left, and a ceramic column behind him, a floor made of red pine wood, and a young, beautiful woman the size of a wall sitting before him, her hair cascading down like silk. Understandably, he believes this to be a dream. But no. The polka-dotted wall is a book bag, the ceramic column is a coffee mug, and the burning sun is a desk lamp silently looking down upon the scene. And he is not in a dream world of giants, but reality. A strange one where she is not gigantic. He is merely small, shrunken down. Why? She claims ignorance, saying that she happened to find him walking outside in the street, tiny as a doll, and she claimed him. She offers to protect and take care of him, to help him find a way to get back to normal. She also offers to find a way to restore his memories, since the only thing the young man can recall is his name, Rin. She introduces herself as Saeko, written with a kanji sai, meaning cold and clear, like moonlight. She is Rin's new god. Shortly thereafter, Rin awakens in darkness, inside a wooden square box surrounded by large objects. A peanut, a little cup filled with water, an iPod with earbuds and a spinning top. He meets three other people in that lightless space. Moko, a very unfiltered young woman who confuses Rin for a girl due to his soft features. Taki, a handsome young man who Moko is intimidated by and seems to be able to see right through people, almost as if he can read their minds. And Chio, an older woman who seems oddly familiar with who Rin is, but doesn't seem willing to give anything away, even perking up when Rin confirms that he can't recall anything about himself or her, though she seems happy to poke fun at his naivete, calling him a virgin. Afterwards, the atmosphere is light. Taki informs Rin that they are all in Saeko's desk drawer, and she has chosen him to be the supervisor, stating that he is the only one who can touch anything in the drawer, and if someone else wants something, they need to request it from him, to which Taki prompts Rin to give him the spinning top in the corner, for no reason other than idle entertainment. Taki then asks Moko if she's hungry, which she doesn't deny, though he seems a little forceful about this. He then asks Rin to give the peanut to Moko. He does, and Moko is thankful, but when she offers to share it with Rin, Taki intervenes, insisting that Moko needs to eat the peanut herself immediately. When she finishes it, he quickly thanks her and suddenly leaves. Changing the subject, Moko and Rin discuss what they think of the other two, with Rin feeling annoyed that Chio called him a virgin, to which Moko disagrees and posits a theory of her own by grabbing at Rin's crotch, confirming quite enthusiastically that he is in fact male. Rin is understandably befuddled by this, but Moko is just thrilled at the amount of inspiration, particularly from Saeko, explaining how she was helping a friend create a lewd comic strip when she happened upon a beautiful black-haired girl before something happened to her, and she then woke up in the drawer. The conversation continues in a lively way, until suddenly there is a tremor. A low, muffled vibration reverberates from a distance. Then another. Moko asks if it is an earthquake, but Taki coolly informs them that no, it isn't. The ground shakes yet again, growing stronger, as if something enormous is approaching. It grows even stronger. He informs everyone that it's just Saeko returning from university. There is the sound of breathing, fabric touching fabric, and the sound of cheerful humming cutting through the air. Yet Moko is concerned, noting that for some reason Taki's face is riddled in fear. The ground begins to shudder, so much so that Rin falls to the ground. Then he hears a creaking sound, and the light comes in. Saeko greets them from on high, her red eyes twin blood moons. She greets them warmly, her voice sweeter than honey. Saeko then reaches into the drawer and picks up Moko between two fingers, bringing her up into the heavens, and then... Satisfied with her meal, she congratulates Rin on a job well done, but his confusion belies Taki's deception. He meekly explains that if he didn't leave out some of the details, then Rin would have objected. He will pay for his failure with his life. As she wipes her hands clean from the syrupy blood, her cold and clear gaze looms over Rin. Colder than moonlight, she leaves him with a final message. Welcome to my world. This is Saeko, Giantess Dating Sim, a short visual novel spanning about 4 hours, developed by Safe Havn Studios and published by Hyperreal. Of note, Safe Havn consists largely of the works of 3 people, who go by KYP, Ko, and Mastani, with some translation help from outside sources. KYP in particular is behind the writing, music, and programming, while Ko is primarily behind designing Saeko. The game cycles through 3 modes. The first is handling the drawer, and choosing who will be sacrificed to Saeko. Simply put, everyone in the drawer has 2 values, appeal ability and health. Whoever's appeal is over 50, Saeko will choose to devour, and if anyone's health is reduced to 0, or if no one's appeal is over 50, she will kill everyone in the drawer, and the game is over. You don't have any real control over these values. They act more as a way to keep the story directed to where the author wants it to go. Since you are only given 1 food per night, there's nothing for you to do but choose among the people who will hit 50 or higher. Otherwise, you just game over. Health is really more like a measure of a person's psyche than their actual physical health. Saeko, being the connoisseur of cannibalism, wants her prey to struggle and squirm as they're going down. Otherwise, there's no satisfaction in it for her. So if anyone suffers a mental shutdown or goes catatonic, she'll kill Rin, and everyone else. After her meal, she will bring Rin out of the drawer and have a conversation with him as she does her homework. These largely one-sided conversations are not a reprieve, however, for Saeko is a demanding woman, easily annoyed by over-attention, negligence, and talking before she's finished speaking, and stirring her ire will result in... Speaking as a game, these conversations don't quite work to keep what should be the tension of walking on eggshells well. One can simply just hit an affirmative every 2 or 3 prompts and you will be fine. The tension comes from when she asks you a question and trying to figure out which answer is least likely to set her off. As a general rule, agreeing with her is the easiest, but going deeper into some of these can reward you with token gifts from her. You can't do anything with them, other than try for an achievement by collecting all of them. Fortunately, you can do it over multiple save files. Frankly, I don't think you can get all of them in one run since there are 3 different versions tied to the endings. It can be frustrating to have to redo them if you accidentally fast forward past a critical prompt and she crushes you because you weren't responsive enough. But it is where we learn the most about Saeko. She is a domineering, sadistic, fashionable woman who prefers things to be orderly. She lives alone and attends university. Her mother is never mentioned, but her father is alive, though not really relevant, outside of one key detail. And she doesn't understand the shows and music that are popular among her college friends, though I think it's more accurate to say she understands them on a mechanical level. She just doesn't see the appeal in them. The things that make her happy and what make other people happy doesn't align, and this causes her some frustration. There is more, of course, but I think it's best to save those details for later. The third and final section of gameplay involves playing with Saeko's phone. It is here that you can get some outside knowledge of what is going on in the world, see the token gifts that Saeko gives you, read a phone novel involving a girl caught in a love triangle between a delinquent and a cool boy in her school, and play a Jump King-esque minigame of trying to ascend as you move left and right automatically with only a double jump. There's nothing really going on with the phone game, except fan service, and I think it's a good decision to only give you 3 tries per night. Otherwise, I suspect that people would burn themselves out on it in frustration. But I will shout out how impressively it's designed aesthetically. It'd be easy for Rin to just push a single button for every action, but no, he's actively using his entire body to push the correct buttons for cycling through the menu and even scrolling up and down the news articles. And if you get a certain trinket, you can see his reflection on the screen. It's a nice touch. Now, while we could go day by day to cover this story, I think the natural repetition would be uninteresting. The game strictly follows the pattern of meet new people, speak with them a bit, feed Saeko, and repeat. There is an arc that involves Chio and Rin, but I think it's better to cover that near the end. So instead, I'll go victim by victim and discuss who they are and what their stories are as people, and how I think they relate to the game's core themes. I'll also give the first of 2 spoiler warnings. I reiterate again, this is a short story. My first playthrough with breaks only took 4 hours, and more time than I care to admit was wasted trying to beat the Jump King game. So if the premise at all interests you, go and get it now. If you came here looking for a quick review, here are my major bullet points. It is a unique premise that covers some uncomfortable grounds that most horror games don't do, outside of, let's say, prurient works. The sprite work is legitimately gorgeous, particularly involving Saeko. It's hard to overemphasize how the camera always frames her in the right way to make her this towering idol to power and grace, beauty and malice. She's not a very expressive person, so the subtle things like the narrowing of her eyes when she starts to get annoyed, or the little smile she gives when she's happy stand out like crazy. The spidery movement of her fingers as she writes on the desk, the lighting on her skin from the desk lamp, the way her hair catches in the wind. Not everything looks perfect. I think her looming over the drawer probably needed another touch-up, though, given her figure, I can understand why she looks this way, but otherwise, god damn! This woman wasn't just drawn, she is sculpted! While everyone else is portrayed as little chibi pixel people, or scribbly pencil drawings or monochromatic portraits with their eyes shining their defining color, the game carves the biblical fact into your bones that Saeko is on a whole different plane of existence to these people. And if it isn't obvious by how I'm talking about it, this is fetish work. Like the actual Merriam-Webster C definition of fetish work, as an object of worship fetish work. The author admits in a joint interview with the creative lead behind Valhalla and .45 Parabellum Bloodhound that the story is inspired by his fascination with giantesses, with his full chest. And honestly, I respect that. Some of the best pieces of art and stories I've read and worked on have been fetish work. But the thing people forget about fetish artists of any kind is that they're a lot like finding a legendary blacksmith high up in the mountains. If all that person has done their entire life is eat, sleep, and make swords, they're going to be the best at making swords in the world. And I cannot think of many games that wanted to sell me on an idea as hard as this one wants you to both be into this woman and fear for your life in her presence as much as this one does. And frankly, it succeeds a lot more than I expected it to. That said, it's also clear that he restrained himself, saying that while some people did wish Saeko got into more intimate details, I think it was a good call to stick to the horror aspect. It is a thin line between horror and eroticism, and you run the risk of having people who don't get it getting wigged out and disengaging if you go too hard. I think it's already straddling that line with a number of its characters already. Most of them have some sort of thing about them, but they're never around long enough to where it becomes annoying or overdone, as could happen with Danganronpa's filter characters. It's a fascinating interview that covers a lot more than just this. I highly suggest checking it out, the link's in the description. The music and sound design is also really good. I don't listen to lo-fi stuff that often, but it certainly does help to fit the vibe well. Almost like being underwater or trapped in some otherworldly place or dream, one outside of our objective reality. Though, when it wants to get your hackles raised, it succeeds there too, particularly the track that plays when Saeko eats people. There is something special when the composer names a track and I quote, "I had too much fun while making this shit." If I had any complaint, it's that everyone's text uses the same sound effect. That said, there are some leaps in logic that the game is going to ask you to accept, particularly involving Saeko, Rin, and one late-game character that I would say is absurd. Due to the narrative structure, the other victims rarely talk to each other. You might have noticed how Chio just sort of secluded herself in the corner after her intro. Well, because of how you get to choose who is sacrificed, they aren't written to account for each other. They'll talk about each other to Rin, but aside from some flavor text on the items in the drawer, the only time they'll talk directly to each other is when they're hard scripted to have to be there together. The game also has a bit of an issue with repetitive text. It's not an exaggeration to say that 90% of the time, every scene when Saeko approaches the drawer and eats someone is almost word for word the exact same, except for whoever is getting eaten. There are some differences, but they're extremely minor. And just to reiterate one more time, because prurient is an odd word, this game is kinda weird when it comes to sexual material and how it handles Rin. Not in a horny way, aside from, look at the title, but again, this is a horror story. There is nothing visually explicit, aside from Saeko's violence, and I'm not going to linger on it more than necessary, but when I tell you that Moko is probably one of the tamer examples, and she grabbed Rin's junk wanting to see if he was a girl or a boy cross-dressing, I want you to understand what you are getting into. The game boots up with a warning that includes descriptions of cruelty and sexual language. Please play at your own discretion, then rest as necessary. It is not bluffing. This isn't like Emergence or Blood Meridian Tier or anything crazy, but this gets to some unnerving places, particularly involving one of the endings. So if you know all that, and you're still interested, have a good day. Enjoy yourself and suffer well. If not, sit back and relax, and let's turn the page to Chapter 2, Apotosis. Rin wakes up in Chio's lap, and honestly, let's put her to the side for now, since getting through her deal is going to require a good amount of context. Just keep in the back of your mind that she's here, more than happy to help Rin however she can, and everyone else in the drawer can see it. First is Haru, and man, poor Haru, the youngest of the entire cast. He's very bashful and shy, pretty much what Chio accused Rin of being prior. He isn't handling his abduction well, already threatening to give into despair as soon as you meet him. We sadly don't get much information about him since he's the tutorial for how health is supposed to work. After giving him a napkin that he folds into an overcoat, he rapidly spirals, thinking that his abduction is divine punishment for urinating on an anthill when he was in elementary school, catastrophizing into thinking that Saeko is going to do the same to everyone in the drawer. Yep. And while you can try to spare him, he unfortunately shuts down in front of Saeko, securing your dismissal without pay. Thus, he becomes Rin's first proper on-screen kill, since he was technically tricked into killing Moko. Haru screams and pleads for Saeko to not drown them, only to learn the truth far, far too late. Next is Kina, Yui, and Shimon. In a single playthrough, you won't get the full picture on everyone since there are certain nuances to their character that only emerges if you save them for last. And while this freedom is nice, you can feel the author's hand forcing the scenario since all three of them will inevitably break down and willingly ask to be chosen once they're the only one left. Some face the end better than others, but it is worth at least making a few saves to check all of them out. Kina is my favorite of the three. She comes off as abrasive and standoffish, calling Rin a fuckboy. She's 100% right, but we'll get there. After seeing him with Chio on the day Haru dies. But it's after seeing Yue the next day that her philosophy comes out. She holds a belief that all people hold an innate urge to enact violence, or more specifically, to dominate and inflict their will on others. And anyone who tries to pretend otherwise are simply lying or trying to deceive you for some ends. However, her framing of this is less of the standard might makes right sense, and more of a matter of well-being. That without an outlet such as BDSM or screaming to metal music, this desire manifests in dark and twisted ways. Hers is in her music, though her band failed to make it big and collapsed after a while. But of particular, she mentions women, particularly the young and beautiful women who are expected to act and behave in a certain way. Presumably, she means in a manner befitting traditional femininity, obedience, supportive, maternal, etc. She says she broke free of this, running away from home and getting a closet-sized apartment in order to fulfill this need from her music, almost pitying Yue and Saeko, believing that it's no wonder that they're the way they are. If she's spared for 2 days, she'll tell you a story about her favorite pair of jeans, how she had left them in a locker backstage in an old venue and, I'm not making this up, found a random guy from another band jerking himself off in those jeans. But rather than discarding them, she took them back and washed them, reveling in how she ran into that guy again at a band tournament and succeeded in psyching him out by wearing those same jeans in front of him. He completely bombed his set afterwards and lost the competition. He evidently bombed so hard, it killed his band that night. When Rin asks if she kept those jeans, Kina affirms that yes, she's wearing them right now, in fact. Either way, after rocking her heart out, she goes out and joins Jimi Hendrix in the Hall of Rock Legends, without fear. Steam achievements aren't a perfect measure of popularity, but it's abundantly clear she's the one who was spared the most. And I have a couple of theories. One of which is that Chio never suggests killing her, and despite coming off as abrasive and calling Rin, and by extent the player, a fuckboy to his face, she's got the most charitable intro. And because Haru is the choice by default, people get more time to care about her, which is something that the other two are in dire need of. If Saeko did not abduct Yue, I promise you, she probably would have had her own horror novel. Yue is an office lady who knows exactly what she wants in life: romance, good food, and idols. After she asks Rin to build her a phone, which the closest thing you'll get is some cup and string, she will reveal that she obviously knew this would have never worked. But Rin was just so earnest in the effort she couldn't say anything about it, which is a bit weird, but compared to how Haru handled things, a little bit of offness isn't unexpected. And when she hears about how Rin was taken out on a date with Saeko, she wants to hear all of the details. Very supportive. But it's how she combined all three of her interests that really shows just the kind of woman she is. When you first meet her, she makes a brief mention of worrying about a Mr. Pet. Mr. Pet, I suspect, is the name she has given to her idol boyfriend. And I use that term loosely because we only have her testimony on the matter. By her exact words, she met him in an underground concert, gave him some chocolate at a handshaking event, took him home, and they've been dating ever since. And when you feed her, she despairs that she had plans for him that day. There's enough middle ground to suspect that she totally poisoned and kidnapped some poor dude and is torturing him in her home. If you spare her for last, she will turn the stem of the cherry she eats into a cat o' nine tails and attempts to whip Rin with it, which honestly deserved, but something odd happens. She stops in midair, or perhaps she is stopped, as if by a force field. This isn't really backed up by anything in the text, but I suspect it had to do with Saeko. This is a side tangent, but you might have been thinking, how does Saeko shrink people? The answer is basically magic. A strange mask that only comes up offhandedly in a conversation near the end and is never shown, but I suspect that this is supposed to foreshadow that Saeko is actively protecting Rin from any unwarranted harm. After all, no one gets to pop her precious little Rinberry but her. And man, does she. I also think that Yue is written to exemplify Kina's philosophy, a serpent hiding in a beautiful flower. And when Saeko plucks her up from the drawer, she bares her fangs and struggles with all of her might. Which is why I think she didn't stop herself from assaulting Rin. I also think she exemplifies a core problem that this game has. There isn't enough time to develop the characters, aside from Rin, Saeko, Chio, and someone else we'll meet shortly, in order to really care about them. Kina works great because you have enough time with her to truly know her, whereas Yue comes off from the jump as a problem, so it's too easy to simply discard her before you get to even know her. Which is something that Shinon has even worse. Shinon is probably one of the best bait-and-switch characters I've read in fiction. It's almost masterful how your perspective on the guy can rapidly change depending on if you let him live for a day or not. Off the bat, he wakes Rin up in the middle of a dream about his memories, comes off as this self-important, smug asshole who thinks that because he's an author, he's smarter and better than everyone else. Then he tries to give Rin tips for hooking up with girls and boosting his intelligence, constantly trying to butt into conversations between Rin and the others, and just overall being annoying. You really only suspect there might be something more going on with him because after you feed him, he reveals that what he writes is romance, more specifically cell phone novels, and even more specifically is the cell phone novel that you can read in the phone, which, if you will permit me to quote the first chapter, "Oh no, I have to hurry or I'm gonna be late." It was a normal sunny morning. Ayaka pushed open the door and went out in her school uniform. Ayaka didn't take school that seriously compared to other people in her class. Her hair was dyed brown and she wore light makeup too, so she didn't really care about being late. But being late is still kind of embarrassing, right? But just as she started running, bam! Ayaka ran right into somebody. Ouch! She heard a voice behind her. Ayaka fell to the hard ground after running into somebody. Oh, it hurts. But that voice just now sounded super angry. Ayaka turned around nervously, and there she saw a blonde-haired delinquent in a black Gakuron uniform. Now that she thought about it, she'd heard that there were still boys like this at the high school near her house. No way! At this rate, this boy was going to get really mad at Ayaka. Trouble alert! You picking a fight with me? No way! The boy in the black uniform that Ayaka ran into slowly got up on his 2 feet. He's huge. He was only a bit taller than Ayaka, but those big shoulders and chest, even with his clothes on, it was clear that he was super strong. Ayaka should have run, but her feet wouldn't move. She just sat on the ground and looked at the face of the delinquent in front of her. Flushed cheeks and messy blonde hair. His hair was long for a boy, and it was a bit curly at the ends. The delinquent looked at Ayaka. Did he notice her looking at him? Then, he smirked. Eek! Super creepy. Help me. Somebody. Anybody. Ayaka held back the urge to shriek without caring about anyone noticing and just shut her eyes tight. Hey, what are you doing here? Right at that moment, Ayaka heard a young man's voice nearby. Wow, what a cool, deep voice. It definitely wasn't the time to be thinking about something like that, but Ayaka always did this. Tah. The delinquent made a click with his tongue and ran off. I'm okay? Ayaka listened as the footsteps went farther away and timidly opened her eyes. And there she saw pale skin, light brown hair, fine, well-shaped eyebrows, pants low on his hips with a rumpled shirt. Tall, probably at least 180 cm. You okay? Careful. Girls shouldn't lie on the ground like that. Kya! Ayaka's head was still spinning like it had never spun before when the boy put his hand on Ayaka's back and helped her get up off the ground. Now, as you can imagine, this is just the most typical shoujo romance thing on the planet. All it's missing is a piece of toast in the protagonist's mouth and it'd be complete. You'd think Shimon would be into some weird self-help nonsense or maybe even sci-fi or crime dramas, but no. He's a romance author who did get into it for the sake of connecting to a girlfriend, but end up sticking with it long after they broke up. Poor guy is here for one day, and he's already failing the resolve check. Fragile, like a robin's egg. And to his credit, he is smart. Kina and Yue catch on to what's going on, but Kina needs to see it 3 times and Yue twice. Shimon puts it all together in just 1, and he's just ready for it. But before, he really does want to impart something important on Rin, his final lesson. Now I don't know if this is a translation issue or something done on purpose, but what Shimon seems to mean by intelligence is empathy. I'm reminded of how Metaphor Rifantasio does something similar by calling what most English speakers would view as empathy as tolerance. In the United States, tolerance has something of a begrudging aspect. To tolerate something is to permit its presence, whereas empathy is to place yourself in their shoes to understand their perspective. Which is what Shimon, in fact, I think it's better to hear it from his own mouth. By the way, I told you I'd teach you how to sharpen your mind yesterday, right? What are you looking all meek like that for? You finally want to listen?
Not really, to be honest, but this will probably be my last chance to talk to Shimon.
Well, I need a distraction. Sorry, but you're my audience, willing or otherwise. The best way to get smarter is to understand other people's feelings. That's what I think.
Huh?
If you understand other people's feelings, you can use other people's heads. You can take in how other people think and feel. Then you can always look at anything from multiple perspectives. That's the best shortcut to getting smarter.
Huh. Sorry, I just didn't expect that. When you were going on about sharpening your mind, I thought you'd be sharing a huge secret or something.
What? Of course there's no secret like that. If there were, we'd all be geniuses. All you can do is take things step by step and develop your sensitivity. That's the only way to become an intellectual like me. That said, here I am in a life or death situation, and that sensitivity is gonna get me killed. I'm going to tell you something now, but don't laugh. I'm actually a cell phone novelist. And I'm not writing stories with middle-aged men as the main characters because who even wants that? I write for a female student audience on a site called Magic J-Land. My story's quite popular, actually. It's getting published soon. I bet you can't believe it. It's not like I read that much, and well, I look like this. Just some dude.
No, it makes sense to me. Though I am a bit surprised. You seem to get how girls feel, Shimon.
You've got the skill for it too. I only started writing because of a woman I used to date. She liked reading cell phone novels, so I wanted something to talk to her about. But before I knew it, I was more invested than she was. You can become somebody completely different and see yourself from the other side of the world. I never knew little things like this could be so fun. I broke up with her for some reason, but the hobby stayed with me. Even when I started dating somebody else, my head was just filled with things I wanted to write. In no time, I became a popular author. I had the talent, obviously. Looking at something from the point of view of somebody completely different from you. Only an intellectual like me can pull it off.
Wow.
Impressed, are you? Well, that talent's only been a drag for me here. I keep imagining how a little person must feel when being eaten. On the other hand, I can also imagine how Saeko must feel when eating a little person.
You can?
Yeah, I can. After all, I've got that intellectual talent. Anyone can imagine the pain of the person being eaten. But how about the suffering of Saeko, who's doing the eating? Only a smart guy like me can really get it. And that suffering, from how I see it, it seems hundreds of times more painful than what the person being eaten feels. That's why it hurts me to watch. Anyway, it's about time. I can hear something in the distance. Thanks, my man. I'm glad I got to talk to you in the end. I'll do what I can, too.
I'd like to say Shimon goes to Saeko's stomach with dignity and grace, but that'd be unfair to mock him for it. He tries to appeal to understanding her struggles, but she only wants one thing, and it's delicious. That said, he is, in a way, correct. Empathy, as bizarre as it sounds, is going to be a key factor in how the story can end. But before we get to Chapter 3, I'd like to do a little bit of cleanup. Throughout this section in Saeko's phone, there are three major threads going on in the background. First is Japan's economy tanking in response to the 2008 financial crisis. Second is the rise in pollution. And finally is the public's reaction to the disappearances, i.e. Saeko's victims. Insurance companies have started to file claims since, naturally, there are no bodies. And now that the daughter of the CEO of a major conglomerate has disappeared, the police have taken a more active interest in solving it. Because of course. Pertaining to the pollution, specifically it is about an industrial compound called beta-noxinus that has gone as far as to annihilate the salmon population in the United States by 70% over the past 10 years. and it is starting to affect Japan's food production. This doesn't seem to be a real compound, but it does come up later on. That said, it is time for the daughter of the conglomerate to come up now because, yep. If what I am about to describe to you sounds incredibly slapdash and rushed, it's pretty much because it is. That isn't to say it's bad. There are some interesting themes going on here, but it's just a lot of stuff is kind of just linchpinned onto a single character who we've had allusions to existing. She's who Rin has been dreaming of when he sleeps, but technically, we've already met the CEO heiress since she arrives at the final day that either Kina, Yue, or Sheena gets to see, but I wanted to keep her aside because she and Chio need their own section to explain this clusterfuck. Let's start with Chio. As I've alluded to, Chio has been here a while. A long while. Long enough to have known Rin since before his amnesia. Don't worry, I'll get to that. So long that she's basically become numb to the horror of this place, and has even developed a Stockholm Syndrome-like sympathy towards Saeko. After Taki was crushed, she asserted herself as Rin's advisor, and while she only ever insisted that he needed to kill Haru since he was on the brink of a mental shutdown, you can't escape this nebulous feeling of wondering if she's trying to control Rin. I only mention it once after Haru, but it's made clear that she sleeps with Rin after every kill. Everybody comments on it, and she's always there to assuage any worries or doubts about doing this, saying that it's better to not think about it, that doing so will only make it hurt worse, so it's better to just take some joy in the decision. Now granted, Rin's an adult, but with his amnesia and her being older than him, I'd probably call this textbook grooming, reinforcing negative behaviors by associating it with feelings of pleasure. And throughout all of this, she maintains a calm control until Clare Kotobishi arrives. Because Clare Kotobishi is not only the only character in the game who has a last name, is not just the heiress of a major conglomerate, she is also Rin's girlfriend, as in Rin's childhood friend girlfriend. And understandably, Rin is completely blindsided by this. Even with Clare standing right in front of him, he can't connect the dots, which does leave some grounds for doubt. Everyone else in this drawer has been some level of crazy. Clare could be just lying. So Chio tries to rebuff Clare, wanting to believe that she is lying until... And again, I am not making this up.
My name is Clare Kotobishi. I never thought I would have to reintroduce myself to you. It's as if we've returned to the starting line. We spent many precious hours together, if you must know. Hey, couldn't help but overhear you yapping about being Rin's ex or whatever, but could you stop with the lies? Or are you talking big to sully the memory of Rin's first time? That's what you're worried about? First time? Rin, what does she mean by that? Listen up. If you want to keep insisting that you really were Rin's girlfriend, show us some proof. You're making a stink because you know he doesn't remember anything. How dare you tarnish this pure boy's reputation? You're just a horrible liar. He comes fast, doesn't he? What? And he likes doing it with the armpit. A few thrusts and he's done. Am I wrong? How do you... Why do you know? Why is this super embarrassing conversation even happening? What else? He has a scar on the back of his calf. His right one, if I remember correctly. He got it while making a secret base in elementary school. The doctor said it would never heal. But he got that injury trying to protect me. Even after we got together, he always tried to keep me from seeing it. He'd wear full-length pants even when sleeping in the summer. I'm sure he didn't want me to feel guilty about it. No way. Then Rin really wasn't a virgin?
Needless to say, Clara's claims are verified, as much as they can be. But Chio doesn't take this lying down first by, in my view, trying to reassert her position by requesting Rin to comfort her right there in front of Clara. And when that doesn't work, tries to gently suggest that Rin sacrifice Clara when whoever you have left surviving is on the brink of shutting down. She says that she was joking. But do you really trust that? This is all obviously coming to a head, and it leads into the two branches that lead into the three endings. Before we get there, I'd like to talk about why I don't like how this is playing out. Here's the thing. Clare being Rin's real girlfriend is fine. Clare being this rich heiress whose disappearance is going to lead to the police identifying Saeko as the prime suspect of the disappearances is also fine. Her being both at once, and the amount that the story needs you to let slide in order for this to work, hits a breaking point. Because for this to work, the following needs to happen. Saeko needs to knowingly and stupidly put herself at risk, given that all of her prior victims, that we know of, are generally people low on the social totem pole. A mangaka assistant, Taki, who, given his handsomeness and ability to read people, I'm going to assume is either a host or part of Japan's nightlife scene, a random high school boy who peed on an anthill, an out-of-work musician, an office lady, and a cell phone novelist. Oh, and there are more. Probably far too many more to not raise eyebrows, if I'm honest. We can assume that she tries to get people who are either vulnerable or at least won't be missed, and her arrogance, pride, or interest in Rin would override this, which... that isn't unthinkable. Saeko says she did it primarily to test Rin. Whether that means test his loyalty, or if he truly has no memories, which I will get to, trust me, we don't get a specific answer. Most of the time when people get busted doing crimes, it's because they either get comfortable or lazy, or they make a dumb mistake. But the thing is that Clara was loudly searching for Rin. There are both multiple news articles that are published about her, and she even went as far as sending out an email that honestly sounds like a chainmail scam. But if we take it as genuine evidence, she has a personal security team, which means that Saeko had to get this chain email, then either lure Clara away from her personal entourage, or somehow get her alone, hit her with a gnomish shrink ray, and then abscond with her quarry before any of Clara's goons found her, which again could be fine if we didn't have to accept that on top of another problem. How the fuck does Clara even know Rin? The story Clara gives us is that when she and Rin were children, Clara ran away after being scolded by her piano tutor. She wound up on a park bench, crying, and Rin went up to her and asked her what was wrong. Then after she told him, he took her hand, escorted her back home, and then told the staff and her parents that they weren't treating her right. And then everybody clapped. No, but seriously. Afterwards, the two bonded until Clara was sent to attend high school in Germany, where she presumably stayed until she realized that Rin has gone missing, at which point she returned to Japan to try and rescue him. Now, granted, as you can probably tell, I'm an American. I'm sorry. So my perspective might be skewed by this, but it's incredibly unlikely for kids from separate tax brackets to really mingle like this. Not impossible, but again, we're talking about the daughter of a conglomerate head. Like, imagine if some random nobody walked up to you and said, "Yeah, I knew the daughter of the CEO of Walmart. She was my girlfriend. You wouldn't know her. She's in Canada." You'd fucking laugh at the absurdity of it. In fact, when I first read this, it sounded like something out of a bad harem manga, which... 3 different powerful women fighting over the affection of one man. Hey, wait a minute! Look, we don't know anything about Rin's social standing. We're not going to. And with what little we've seen of Rin's personality, I do not buy for 1 second that this mealy-mouthed pushover who balks at getting called a virgin is the same person who would dramatically play hero like this as a child. But you know what? It's not impossible. Head injuries are known to radically change a person's personality. It's not unheard of for someone who is kind, sweet, and gentle to become incredibly violent or vice versa. I've had loved ones suffering from dementia undergo something similar. It does happen, and it fucking sucks. And it's probably the point to see just how changed and corrupted Rin has become from his time in the drawer. But here is yet another thing. Remember how I said that Chio told Rin that she knew him before he lost his memories? She didn't mean she knew him outside of Saeko's House of Horrors. She knew him inside, as in he has been here for much, much longer than we thought he was. How long? We don't get an exact timeline. Given that Saeko has been doing this shit for capital Y years, we can assume that Rin has been feeding people for a good while. Long enough for him to have evidently enjoyed doing it. A little too much if Saeko is to be believed. Which raises the question of why didn't Clara find out about it much sooner? It's 2008, so keeping track of people isn't that easy without smartphones. But I feel like given she's 21 years old and not in high school, there would have been some communication between them. I can't buy Rin being missing long enough for his personality to become so warped, and Clara having the means and resources to try and rescue him with how much she seems to genuinely love him. And I'll keep going with another one. Chio knows how Rin lost his memories. Can you guess how it happened? Well, keep guessing with me, because I still don't know and I've played this game for longer than I should have. All we get is that someone was talking about breaking out of the drawer and Saeko got pissed and did something bad to everyone, which resulted in Rin's amnesia. But that conflicts with something we'll find out later on. You see what I mean? There are countless weird little problems that individually you can ignore, but it does hit this critical point where it all starts to collapse. This is the problem with having everything hinge on Clare. We spend so much time in the drawer, and the only way there can be any forward progression until she appears is the foreshadowing in the phone. With that said, I don't know how else you can give Rin an out without her, unless you give him a motivation beyond his own survival. Rin never bothers to think about escaping, aside from when he helps Kina to try and climb the iPod. He can't beat Saeko, he can't kill her, he can't try to appeal to her morality because she's a sociopath. I'm not saying that lightly. She pretty much describes herself as one in all but name, but more importantly, he doesn't seem to want to. Without something as, and I don't like using this term, forced as Clare is on the narrative, the story is kind of stuck. Could a lot of this have been averted if the authors split up Rin's girlfriend and the conglomerate heir into two different people? Say, utilizing Akari? Did you notice her? She sits off in a corner, dumps water on her head. She also implies some unnerving stuff in one of the endings, but otherwise she's just kind of a mushroom. And I needed to double check because I kept mixing her up with 999's Akane, because of how little she contributes to the plot. But I don't think that's the point. Yes, there are a lot of leaps in logic here. A lot of characters acting dumb for the sake of the story, and a lot of things that are spackled over or just left off page. But given what the narrative is trying to convey here, I do think it's important to give it some grace. This is a story about how systems of oppression slowly erode our moral centers, how horrible atrocities slowly mutate us from rejecting cruelty to accepting it to relishing in it, how we condition ourselves to avoid danger by monitoring what we say, particularly in the presence of those in authority who view our lives as little more than bugs to be crushed or food to be devoured. How overwhelming power corrupts and distorts us, leeches the will to resist out of our bones like a parasite, or worse, twists us to act against our own interests just for a scrap of it, a mere taste of it. And in my view, it does it in a brutal and efficient way. And all through the lens of a big woman eating people. Next time someone tells you fetish art can't have meaning, you send them a copy of this game. They'll probably get wigged out, which if nothing else would be pretty funny. After Yue, Kina, or Shimon exit the stage, Saeko gives Clare a warning not to even think of defying her. Naturally, Clara doesn't give a shit. Horrified that Rin not only didn't tell her about Saeko, he didn't do anything. She becomes desperate to try and rescue him. Horrified at what this scenario has done to everyone else in the drawer, she begins plotting to try and find some way, any way to try and escape. Even if it means open rebellion, even if the odds of success are practically suicidal, she will protect Rin with her dying breath if need be, ready to go to war with a paperclip and vigor that the drawer hasn't seen in ages. Chio is of course opposed, not just because Clara is her romantic rival, but because of the blowback that will result from this. So while Clara is trying to make a weapon out of a paperclip, Chio is all but begging Rin to stop her, by any means necessary. After all, it hasn't been so bad, right? They're safe here, as long as they behave. And really, why would you want to hurt Saeko? She doesn't mean anything by it. She's too innocent and pure to be evil, like Clara suggests. That homewrecker. Akina continues to be a non-factor, basically wishing to just die and get it over with, telling Rin to pick whatever he wants so long as he doesn't bother her. Excellent character, definitely not underutilized whatsoever. No siree, Bob. Thus, it comes to this. Chio or Clara? One daikon radish. What kind of man is Rin? This is the final spoiler warning. I remind you again, this game opens with a warning, includes descriptions of cruelty and sexual language. The game is not bluffing, and it's going to get worse. One of these endings genuinely unnerved me, and it's the first one we're going to cover. If you want to skip the worst of it, go ahead and jump to this time code. Ready? All right then. So, fun fact, this is actually my second attempt at writing a script. I had originally wanted to do a more, not blasé, but I guess more flippant review. At the time, I had only done one playthrough. Kina was the one I'd chosen to sacrifice last, and I simply placed a save point here to wind back and just hammer out the 3 endings without thinking on it. I had just finished another VN. Stories of Soul, the Gun Dog. Good story, not nearly as heavy as this one. Great if you enjoy mecha. And I guess when I consider the difference in time it took to finish both, I wasn't in the proper headspace to really get Saeko. As a result, my understanding of the material was incomplete. And I am very glad that I will never publish that mess. My flippancy came from how abrupt I thought this sequence was. I had felt that for how meek, how pushed around, and how little character there was to Rin, that what was about to happen was just edgy nonsense. After all, he was just a meek little nobody with an armpit fetish, constantly getting bullied by everyone in some form or another, who didn't really have a will of his own. To have him go from that to this out of nowhere felt absurd. But no, he's much worse. He's what happens when someone is given power and authority and is incentivized to abuse it. By saving Kina for last every single time I sacrificed someone, I was doing it to them while they had no idea what was going on. After all, Yue and Shimon have no reason to doubt you when you give them food as a gift, so they don't have any objection as they inadvertently gorge themselves on their doom. But if you choose either Yue or Kina on their second day, before they lose the will to live, there is this moment where Rin and they are staring hard at each other, particularly with Kina, where it seems like she might resist, but she doesn't. And then it all makes sense. What would happen if they fought back? What would Rin do? Would he choose someone else? Maybe. He has to feed someone, that's his duty. That is his role in Saeko's world. And she does not suffer failure. There is no one else. Akina isn't a viable sacrifice, and if he's already come this far, why stop? But unlike Kina and Yue, Clara doesn't acquiesce. She knows exactly what is going to happen if she eats that radish, and she's understandably horrified and furious that not only would someone do this, that it would be Rin of all people, the person she loves, who she traveled across the world for to try and rescue him, only to find not the boy who stood up for her against her parents, but the man who cares for nothing and no one else, only his own satisfaction and that of his god. He pins her to the wall, takes a bite out of the radish, chews it, and then forces it into her mouth like a nightmarish pastiche of a bird feeding her chick, forcing her to swallow it with his tongue. All we see of this is Clara's eye, weeping in despair. Again and again he does this, and slowly, Clara stops fighting. All of the resistance bleeds out of her. At a certain point, she may as well be a breathing corpse. She never says another word as Rin's dark and hungering god returns to claim his offering. Did he regain his memories? Was he remolded back into this monster? Or is it just his own selfishness that made him take the easy way out? Who can say? Satisfied with the flavor but disappointed at the lack of fight in Clara, Saeko congratulates Rin. She was worried that Clara would cause issues, but it's clear where his heart lies. She rewards him by taking him out to the beach. Alone on the beach, Saeko reveals some key insights into her and Rin's relationship. As I alluded to before, Rin has been in Saeko's thrall for far, far longer than we thought. But Saeko didn't wipe his memories as punishment for a rebellion. She did it because Rin fell in love with her, which is something she just fundamentally doesn't comprehend. So she thought to reset Rin, and then have him grow to hate her, like all of the other little people, and then eventually he would die. Except he didn't. It happened all over again, which Saeko takes as a sign that this, all of this, is right. That all of her misgivings and frustrations and not being able to feel sympathetic joy or happiness when others succeed are simply who and what she is. And whatever apprehensions she had about indulging her dark urges, the pleasure she feels as she crushes little people's limbs between her fingers, vanishes into the salty waves. And though she doesn't say she loves Rin, she is grateful that he is by her side in this. There is more I want to discuss here, but for the sake of the rest of the audience who have understandably dipped out, I'll save it for later. Rin awakens in the drawer the next day in a comfortably numb state, ready to start another day, unbothered by what he's done to Clara. After all, like Chio said, better not to think of it. Simply enjoy the choice. And he is enjoying the choice with Chio in bed, who is more than satisfied with Rin getting rid of Clara. Rin notices another person has entered the drawer and smiles, excited to see how he can use him. Our final victim, Kazu, is an investigative journalist who gives a direct update on the status of the disappearing case for people who haven't kept up with Saeko's phone. Standing on the ruined remains of Clara's paperclip, he tells Rin that the police have fingered her as being the prime suspect behind the disappearings. They don't know how she's done it, but they're going to apprehend her tomorrow, come hell or high water. He also reveals that the number of Saeko's victims numbers in the hundreds to thousands. And while he's not thrilled at being shrunken and abducted, he hopes to build a psych profile on her for the big scoop he's just itching to write. Rin handles this in a way that is completely alien to how he handled everyone else. Instead of helping Kazu, he blows him off, particularly at the idea that the police could possibly stop Saeko. After all, what can mere men with guns do against a god? He grows annoyed at Kazu's questions and decides to put an end to him. He's not going full Joker about it, but it's clear that all of his hesitation and guilt is gone, replaced with a sick satisfaction of his role. When Akari chides him for putting on the madman act, even remarking that she'd managed to induce this behavior to him once, I don't know how, honestly. Either Akari has just always been in that drawer the whole time and her mushroom stealth aura is that strong, or Saeko has multiple drawers of different collections of little people. He inwardly spites her, hating that he can't offer her to Saeko in a single feeding thanks to her small frame. So he sets his eyes on Kazu. At first, Rin asks Kazu if he's hungry, to which he denies. He notes how obviously shifty Rin is being, going from being an asshole to trying to give him something. But Rin doesn't balk, getting more and more aggressive with Kazu until he hints that he's going to force feed him it, just as he did to Clara. Freaked out, Kazu acquiesces, and shortly thereafter is devoured by Saeko. There is one more conversation with her, but I'd like to save this for later. The next day, the police have come knocking on Saeko's door. Chio is utterly bewildered, unable to comprehend that their salvation is finally here. Saeko opens the drawer and unshrinks Rin, and only Rin, leaving Chio and Akane declaring that she wants to speak to him, as equals. With no care for the outside world, she asks Rin to join her, but he needs to give one last proof of his devotion. He doesn't hesitate for a second. Now, as absurd and wish-fulfilling as this last bit of the ending is, I do find this to be a horrific, if fascinating look into the mind of a certain kind of person. This ending feels like the idealized endpoint of the sort of person who would do anything, any horrible, depraved thing to get a seat at the table of power. There are many names for many people throughout history who were like this. Traitors, fascists, opportunists, those who sold out their community, their people, and damned them to oblivion or ruin to sit at their master's table. History has proven time and time again that no, they'll never have true acceptance from their betters. In reality, they'll always be kept at a distance, a useful tool at best, and a true compatriot never, only to be discarded when convenient, just as Chio was without a single thought. This is what protecting this peace inevitably leads to. The tokens spent, the faces eaten, and the world in ashes as the giants frolic over it. This ending is, and I put this as crassly as I can to get the point across, Uncle Ruckus getting accepted into White Heaven and then getting domed by Ronald Reagan. Welcome back. Now, if you've skipped ahead to here, don't worry, you didn't miss anything much. To recap, we have a choice between sacrificing Clara or Chio. Whether inspired by Clara's courage or sick of Saeko's depravity, Rin picks up the daikon radish and brings it to Chio. At first, she's surprised, but then her face relaxes and relief seems to find her. Almost as if some terrible burden falls off her shoulders, she graciously accepts the daikon and devours it. She reiterates and makes clear what I've already said about her before. She's simply been in this place too long, to the point that it became normal, comfortable. She can't even muster up enough anger to blame Saeko for all that she's done. Her mind has been carved into pure obedience, and it's here that I really cannot help but pity her. After giving Rin one final dirty joke, she says that she's proud of him, calling him an excellent supervisor. When Saeko comes and claims her, she gives a final farewell to Rin and Saeko, accepting her grisly fate, which unfortunately Clara cannot keep her fury in check and curses Saeko to her face. To which Saeko plucks her out of the drawer, kicking and screaming and stabbing at her hand, only to crush her between her fingers, leaving Rin powerless to stop her. Afterwards, she takes Rin out on a final date by the sea, staring out at the lapping waves underneath a pale moon. Saeko looks almost sad, hunched over, the wind casting her hair all about, her crimson eyes unreadable. After awkwardly bouncing around the topic, she asks Rin if he had fun. Compulsively he lies and says yes, but Saeko knows. On some level, she's always known. She implores him to not lie to her again, though the cadence doesn't have that same cold tone to it. There is no implicit threat here. Not this time. How was your job as supervisor? And while you can absolutely just completely bitch out and just go full into pure fuckboy behavior and say yes, I imagine Rin staring out into that shimmering abyss, that moon-scorched sea that cares not for his worries and woes. And in the waves, he sees them, the screams, the despair, and absolute terror in Saeko and Rin's victims' eyes, forever carved into his soul. Moko, Taki, Haru, Yue, Shimon, Kina, Chio, Clare, and however countless many that he can't remember, that Saeko had managed to steal from him not once, but twice. One by one, over and over, as the tide rises and recedes, he sees them, and all of the pain that they must have suffered, and knowing that no matter whatever justification, whatever excuse he could come up with to try and alleviate his own guilt, to distance himself from the nightmare Saeko forced him to perpetuate, he never will. Buried deep in his tiny body is an anger, righteous and impotent, that through all of this he could do nothing. He couldn't stop Saeko even once, didn't even try to, even as his girlfriend was callously taken from him. And there under that pale moon, the same one that loomed over him on the day his life was stolen from him, even if his body hadn't realized it yet, he is just done pretending, done pacifying, placating, and prostrating before the beast. And with his burning soul, he looks out into the midnight dark and says, "It was the worst." And once the kindle sparks, it roars, blooming into a fury as he tells Saeko exactly what he thinks of what she's done. And once it catches, he doesn't stop. He can't stop. His entire soul is burning with rage. He doesn't even notice Saeko trying to put the chill back in her voice, at himself, at her, at everything that led up to this, all of which leads to the simple question of why. To which Saeko explains herself, or rather she tries to deflect, blaming some dark aspect of herself that robs her of her ability to feel happiness at the normal things in life. Similar to the Uncle Ruckus ending, she explains how she couldn't find any sense of fulfillment outside of hurting people, that it was the only thing that gave color to her world. She tries to distance herself from it, if only slightly, wishing that she could be like normal people, that this is simply how she was born. And while Rin does empathize with her, murder is still murder. She's still responsible for this. They both are. And it seems to affect her, if only a little. The next day, Rin is utterly despondent, broken, and exhausted. He struggles with the will to get up, the drawer seeming to be so much larger with Chio and Clare's absence. Kuza is here again, but the meeting goes far differently. Kuza spends a lot of time trying to help Rin, though there's nothing much he can do here. Rin does eventually wake up and helps Kuza access the iPod so he can build a profile, for which Kuza tells him the good news. The police are going to be here tomorrow to arrest Saeko. Yet Rin can't find any joy in this. His guilt in helping Saeko is so overwhelming and all-consuming, he simply wishes to fade away. Akari shares the same sentiment, though she expresses it in a rather sardonic way, projecting it on Kuza. She and Rin both know that they can't just walk away from this and go back to a normal life. And after saying her piece, she leaves Rin to his duty. The rules are simple. Make a little person have at least 50 appeal. Make sure no little people have 0 or worse health. The answer is obvious. He should give it to Kuza. He is the only viable candidate. It's what Saeko would want. Rin takes the cake, and then he gives it to Akari. She knows what he's chosen to do, and she agrees, smiling as she ravishes the confectionery as if it's the last meal in the world. And it very well might be, for all of them. But Rin is satisfied. He can finally move forward and press on. But then the ground quakes, the same familiar tremor that has haunted Rin for the past week. He's ready for it to be the final one when Saeko opens the drawer and reaches inside. When she goes down to feed, she stops, confused at the lack of a prepared offering.
I thought this was right. I've been a terrible person up until now. Tricking others, raising their appeal, and feeding them to you. I'd even started to enjoy it. You're awful, but I've been just as awful. I know I won't be forgiven even if I stop now. I'll have to be punished. But I finally realized my own sins. So I can't give you any more people.
The next day, just as in Uncle Ruckus's timeline, the police are on their way, literally banging on Saeko's front door as she opens the drawer for the final time. She restores everyone to their rightful size, and Akari and Kuza flee for their lives. But Rin notices something on top of the desk. A little woman with dark red eyes sitting prone before him. The Viper and the Rabbit have switched places. The Viper pleads with the Rabbit, begging him to kill her. Afraid of the vengeance of the outside world, she submits herself to Rin's judgment. He picks her up into her palm, just as she did to him all those days ago. And slowly, agonizingly, all of the memories bubble up inside as his fingers begin to squeeze, inch by inch, until they completely envelop her. And it is here that the timeline splits into two worlds. The first is the one where Rin wants nothing to do with Saeko. Last night, when she offers to let him go back into the drawer to get away from her, he accepts it. And whether out of retributive hatred or cold indifference, he obliges her request, feeling her lifeblood slicken his fingers. Half a year later, Akari will call him on the phone. Saeko has been utterly villainized by the press, as she should be. She tells him that though her life is back to normal, normal feels wrong. Some part of her is still trapped in that drawer, and though Rin doesn't say it out loud, it is clear that he is too, trapped with the haunting effigies of the people he fed to the beast, their pitch-black eyes staring up at him, unforgiving, unrelenting, inescapable. The second is where he doesn't take Saeko's offer and chooses to stay with her. They make some small talk, and Saeko gives him the opportunity to ask her some questions. The answers aren't that satisfactory, particularly how she shrinks people. Like I said, her father gave her a mask when she was young, and somehow it blessed her with magic. Yet the air during this conversation is different to the ones before it. There is no fear of setting her off, just two people getting to know one another. But the important part is the final question. Does she have someone she likes? She's evasive at first. After all, she doesn't understand romance or romantic feelings. But she does eventually admit that after setting those aside, that there is someone she doesn't want to hate her, which provides an interesting contrast to the Uncle Ruckus timeline, in which she instead says that there is someone she doesn't wish to lose. And so, after Akari and Kuza flee for their lives, and the Rabbit holds the Viper in his hand, he stops. Perhaps he has taken Shimon's lesson to heart, or he feels it would be hypocritical for only Saeko to be punished when he was just as involved. Perhaps he's simply not the kind of man to do such a thing. Maybe it wouldn't be what Clare wanted him to be. Who can say? Half a year later, we return to the same apartment, though there are differences, particularly a poster with his face on it X'd out lying on the ground. The radio plays a broadcast saying that miraculously, the NOxNO² pollution cleanup efforts have gone well, and the wildlife is flourishing once more. Akane calls again, lamenting that Kazu has published what Rin did in the drawer, and though her life is back to normal, she feels like she is not doing enough with it, that she hasn't earned it. She remarks how curious it is that the NOxNO² spills have been handled so well, almost as if they were shrunken. Rin doesn't acknowledge it. When she asks Rin if she can come over to visit, he rejects her, just as he did in the other timeline. Yet here, he's harboring a far different secret in his drawer. I do enjoy what they're going for with these endings, though I find the implementation a bit weird. That the decision ultimately does come down to empathizing but not forgiving Saeko does fit with a lot of what Kina and Shimon are talking about. Because while yes, Saeko is a monster, you don't get a kill count in the hundreds without being one. She is still a person, a flawed, clinical sociopath, but not one who isn't utterly capable of change, of atonement. I just think it's kind of juvenile and weird to have it come down to whether or not you ask if she has someone she likes. Again, the subtitle is Giantess Dating Sim, but it comes off as Rin only deciding to spare Saeko because he thinks she loves him. Ultimately, for all that I have complained about, I can't help but like this story. Is it a bit repetitive and rushed once you get to day 5? Yes. Are the conversations with Saeko awkward and a bit frustrating when trying to find the trinkets? Oh, hell yes. Especially the earring date. It sucks, especially on mouse, trying to fast forward and then not clicking off in time to speak up before Saeko gets you for an action. But that's the core problem in all horror games. Once you get got, you're no longer afraid, just annoyed. So I can't blame the developer for not being able to solve the Gordian knot of the genre. Are there more leaps of logic in the story than in the Jump King minigame? Probably not that many. But given just how small and focused the team was on delivering their vision, I'm willing to let it go. The game set out to make me feel sickened by Uncle Ruckus Rin, pity for the one trapped in the drawer, and proud of the one who managed to escape and try to redirect his pain into making the world a better place. And I'd say it succeeded. While a lot of characters are purposefully throwaway, the ones who do get the proper focus are excellent. Kina, Chio, Shimon, and Saeko in particular. And yes, for all I complained about it, Clare is excellent too. My only problem again is how much needs to be put on her to get the ball rolling. Perhaps in a theoretical sequel, give the protagonist someone in the drawer to protect at all times. Some other tension beyond simple self-preservation. Given that this is basically a death game in theory, you could have different rules with a different villainess. Maybe the protagonist isn't the supervisor and needs to try and manipulate who is the current supervisor or try to worm their way into being one. Either way, it's a cool idea. When the only thing I can ask for your story is that you give more of it, I think you're doing something right. Whatever or if ever KYP makes another game, I'm absolutely down to get crushed by it. Thank you for listening.